Welcome to Tithe Lies, the place where you can get the biblical truth about tithes and offerings. My brothers and sisters, I am rebooting some of my old content, putting all of my tithing videos onto one channel. So some of this stuff is old. So grade me on the curve for the technology, okay? But the content is still on point.
Tithe preachers quote the book of Malachi to us all the time, and they basically tell us that this book was written to, to indict stingy Jews, okay, who did not want to pay tithes. So folks were keeping their tithes, and God raised up Malachi to rebuke these stingy Jews so that they would begin paying their tithes. Well, that's not true. That's not true at all. First of all, the book was not written to combat Jews not paying tithes. The book was written against preachers who were stealing the tithes that had been given. Did you catch that? The tithes were given, but they were stolen by preachers. Go ahead. There's only 4 chapters in the book. Read the 4 chapters and you will see that this book is not about, Jews keeping tithes for themselves. Now, in this part, I'm going to go over one of the categories of priests, or one of their sins that I want you to see. In Malachi 1, 6 through 8, it says this: a son honors his father, and a servant his master. If then I am, this is God speaking, if I am the father, where is my honor? And if I am a master, where is my reverence? Says the Lord of hosts to you priests who despise my name. Yet you say, in what way have we despised your name? Here's God. You offer defiled food on my altar. But you say, in what way have we defiled you? By saying, the table of the Lord is contemptible. And here's God speaking. Listen to this. And when you offer the blind as a sacrifice, is it not evil? And when you offer the lame and sick, is it not evil? Offer it then to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? Would he accept you favorably, says the Lord of hosts? Now, I wrote here in my book, who and what does God criticize? God names 3 sins of the Jerusalem priesthood. First, they despised his name. Second, they offered defiled food on the altar. Third, they spoke evil of the Lord. And it goes on and on. But here's what I want you to see. There was no missing tithe in the sense that the tithe had not been paid. Tithes had been paid, but they were stolen. And here's how it happened.
If the modern financial tithe system is of God, it should pass the test of light. I'm looking for people to interview, to tell me about their experience tithing. Has it been a blessing or has it been a curse? Drop me a line at tithelies@yahoo.com.
And here's what I guess is not common knowledge. You have the priesthood, the Old Testament priesthood, that came from Moses and Aaron, or really Aaron. You had Levi. Levi gave birth to Moses and Aaron, and a bunch of other guys. All of these guys, Moses, Aaron, and the other brothers, are Levites. They're the sons of Levi. However, Aaron was specially chosen to be the high priest, and from his male posterity would be the priesthood, what we call the priesthood, the high priest. I call them the special priest. The other sons of Levi were just priests, or they were called Levites. It gets kind of tricky here.
Okay, maybe this slide will help a bit. You recall that everything begins with Abraham. There was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. They're called the patriarchs. Of those 12 sons, there was one guy named Levi. And so that's where the origin of the 12 tribes of Israel come from. Now recall that Israel was led out of bondage by Moses, and they're in the wilderness. While they're in the wilderness, God selects the Levites to be his priests. Of course, the Levites come from the patriarch Levi. Okay, so God selects the Levites to be his priests. Now, look at the slide here, and you'll see that here's, let me click, okay, here is Levi, all right, there's Levi. Now, God selects the descendants, the male descendants of Levi, to be his priests. Now, all of those priests right here qualify to be just general priests. But of these general priests, God selects the descendants of Aaron, or Aaron and his descendants, to be special priests. So what do we have? We've got all of the priests, all of the Levites, of course, come from Levi. So you've got Aaron, and you've got everybody else, including Moses. Now, everybody else, males that is, they are general priests. The others are special priests. The significance of this is that the special priests have access to the altar. The general priests have no access to the altar. Now, the significance of that fact is that when you read the book of Malachi is talking to the special priests, those priests that come from Aaron. How do we know that? Well, because when you read when you read Malachi, the first, second, and third chapter, primarily, you see that the duties that Malachi describes there can only be done by these guys, these special priests, because they are the people spoken of as ministering on the altar. When you read Malachi, those indictments, God's threats and his displeasure, is primarily spoken to these guys here, the special priests. Okay, so we're not going to let anyone push this off on us like God is talking to us. He's talking to the special priest, and in a lower level, he's talking to the general priest. So anyway, that should help. All right, let's get back to it.
Aaron and all of them are technically Levites because they are sons of Levi. But so far as function is concerned, they were broken up into two different categories. The importance of this is that the high priests receive 1% of Israel's tithes. The regular priests, the other Levites, they receive 10%. They receive the tithes from the general population, and then they pay tithes of their tithe. Okay, so they pay 10% of their 10% to the high priest, which means 9% went to the Levites, 1% went to the high priest. Here's why I'm laboring to bring this out. When you read Malachi, we are talking about those high priests. The ones who receive 1% tithe are spoken of in Malachi. Okay, so now, and we're going to get back to that. The priests were guilty of offering unacceptable sacrifices. So here you have priests offering God tithes. Where did these priests get the tithes? Well, follow the line here. The general population pays tithes to the Levites. The Levites examine the tithes to make sure they're not sick, blind, crippled, crazy, rabies, and all of that kind of stuff. They take these tithes and they pay a tithe to the priest, the high priest. Now, the high priests examine the tithes to make sure they're good. So here you have three three quality control checks. First, the general population, they check the tithe, they give it to the Levites. The Levites check it, they give it to the high priest. The high priest check it, and they give it to God. However, by the time it reaches God, God says, there's something wrong with this. You're offering me blind animals. They're messed up. They're spotted. They're all crippled. And why would you offer this to me? Now, you don't hear tithe preachers tell you this. God's indictment is against the high priest. And how do we know that the high priests are the ones at fault here? Because no one else could offer anything on the altar except the high priest. Even the Levites, if they approached the altar, they were to be killed. God has said, even if Moses and these guys were to approach the altar, they would be killed. Or not necessarily Moses himself, but if someone came on behalf of Moses, if they were not from the lineage of Aaron, they were going to pay the price, and that price was death. So here's the point. The high priest never did receive 10%. They received 1%. And they took that 1% and gave God the bad stuff. And they kept the good for themselves. Now, they weren't offered bad stuff because they never would have accepted it. What happened? They took some bad goods from someplace else. I don't know where they got these crippled, crazy, blind animals, but they did an old switcheroo on God. And they kept the good stuff for themselves, gave the bad stuff to God, and God called them on it. Interesting, isn't it? Just a little something to make you think.